That was new. He'd never said it without asking for money first. The text came in at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was lying in bed, reading a library book about industrial HVAC systems, the kind of thing that puts most people to sleep but keeps me sharp. My phone lit up on the nightstand. I picked it up expecting the usual, rent money, car payment, some emergency that always turned out to be a want dressed up as a need. Instead, don't call me anymore. I'm tired of you and your requests. I read it twice, then a third time. Requests. I turned the phone off and set it face down on the nightstand. The book stayed open on my chest while I stared at the ceiling. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the occasional car passing on the street below. I lived in a decent place, nothing fancy, but clean, affordable, mine. 2 bedrooms because I liked having space for my tools and paperwork. The second bedroom doubled as an office and workshop. 30 years in municipal facilities management taught me to keep records, maintain equipment, and never throw away anything that might be useful later. My son's text glowed in my memory like a neon sign. Requests. I hadn't requested anything, not once. Every conversation we'd had in the past year followed the same pattern. He called, he needed money, I asked questions, he got defensive, I sent the money anyway. Sometimes his wife would text instead. She had a way of making everything sound urgent and vaguely accusatory, like I was personally responsible for their landlord's policies or their car's transmission or whatever crisis had emerged that week. The last time we'd spoken, really spoken, not just transactional back and forth about money, was 4 months ago. I'd called to ask if they wanted to come over for dinner. Nothing fancy. I wasn't trying to intrude, just thought it would be nice to see my son, maybe watch a game, talk about normal things. He'd said he was busy. His wife said they had plans. I didn't push. That was my request, apparently. I turned off the light and closed my eyes, but sleep took its time. My mind kept circling back to that word. Requests. Like I was some kind of burden. Like I'd been calling him every day begging for attention. The truth was simpler and sadder. I barely heard from him unless he needed something. I thought about responding, defending myself, explaining that he had it backwards. But I didn't. Something about the coldness of that message, the finality of it, made me pause. This wasn't anger. Anger would have been messier, more emotional. This was a decision. He'd decided I was disposable. He'd decided that cutting me off was easier than dealing with whatever inconvenience I represented in his life. So I let it sit. The next morning I went about my routine, coffee, shower, dressed in jeans and a work shirt even though I didn't have any jobs scheduled. Old habits. I'd been running my own small consulting business for 3 years now, helping property managers and small companies with building access, maintenance schedules, security walkthroughs. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept me active. Retirement wasn't for me. I'd seen too many guys my age sit down in a recliner and never get back up. Around 10 a.m., I checked my phone. Nothing. I thought about calling him anyway, asking what I'd done, trying to fix whatever had broken. But that word, requests, kept echoing. He wanted silence? Fine. I'd give him silence. I spent the day organizing my office. I had filing cabinets full of old work orders, building access logs, contractor licenses, blueprints. Most people would have thrown that stuff away years ago. I kept it because you never knew when information would be useful. I'd worked for the city for 27 years before taking early retirement. In that time, I'd supervised maintenance for dozens of municipal buildings, managed contractor relationships, handled security protocols. I knew which buildings had updated their locks and which ones were still using master keys from the 1990s. I knew which property management companies were competent and which ones were cutting corners. I knew a lot of things. By the end of the day, I still hadn't heard from my son. I made myself dinner, baked chicken, rice, steamed broccoli, and ate it at the kitchen table while scrolling through the news on my tablet. Normal evening, normal life, except it wasn't. Something had shifted. I couldn't name it yet, but I felt it in my chest. A tightness, not anger, not exactly. More like clarity. He'd drawn a line. He'd made it clear that I was the problem, that my existence in his life was a burden. Okay, I could work with that. The first week passed quietly. No calls, no texts. I went about my business. I had a consultation with a small office building downtown about upgrading their access control system. I met with a property manager who wanted advice on maintenance schedules for an aging apartment complex. I invoiced clients, paid bills, went to the gym 3 times. Normal life. But I started noticing things. Small things. My son had blocked my number. I discovered this by accident when I tried to send him a photo of an old baseball card I'd found while cleaning out a closet, something from when he was a kid. The message bounced back. Number not available. I checked his social media. I rarely used those platforms, but I had accounts. Basic ones. I'd been connected to my son on 2 of them. Now I wasn't. He'd unfriended me, blocked me there too. His wife had done the same. I sat at my desk staring at the screen, logged into an app I barely understood, looking at the empty space where my son's profile had been. He wasn't just avoiding me, he was erasing me. I clicked around a little more. Found his wife's account. She hadn't blocked me there yet, maybe forgot about that one. Her posts were public. I scrolled through recent updates, photos of brunch, complaints about traffic, a check-in at some trendy restaurant downtown, everything carefully curated to look effortless and successful. Then I found a post from 3 days ago, a photo of her and my son at someone's birthday party. The caption, "Finally feeling free to just be ourselves. No more drama, no more toxic energy, just us and the people who actually support us." The comments were full of encouragement. Friends I'd never met telling her how brave she was, how proud they were, how she deserved peace, toxic energy. I read it again. I'd been to their apartment exactly 4 times in the past 2 years. Each visit was brief, polite. I never stayed long because I could feel the tension. My son would be distracted, checking his phone. His wife would smile, but her eyes were always watching me, evaluating. I never said anything controversial, never criticized. I just existed in their space for an hour and then left. That was toxic, apparently. I closed the browser and sat back in my chair. This wasn't just a son pulling away from his father. This was a narrative, a story they'd been telling themselves and their friends. A story where I was the villain, the burden, the source of their problems. I wondered when it had started. I replayed conversations in my head, looking for the moment it shifted. Maybe it was when I'd asked too many questions about their finances after they'd asked for rent money 3 months in a row. Maybe it was when I'd suggested they look for a cheaper apartment. Maybe it was nothing I'd said at all. Maybe I was just convenient to blame. Didn't matter. What mattered was this. They'd built a story, and in that story, I was disposable. The second week, I started seeing the details. My son's best friend, a guy named Trevor, who I'd known since high school, posted a photo from a basketball game. My son was in the background. The caption mentioned something about finally getting the crew back together. I recognized 2 other people in the photo. One was a former coworker of mine from the city, a guy named Phil. We'd worked together for years. He'd met my son a dozen times at work events. The other was a contractor I'd hired multiple times for side jobs, a guy named Dennis. I'd recommended him to my son when they'd needed some work done on their apartment last year. Both of them were in that photo. Both of them were in that comment thread. Both of them were part of my son's life now. Neither of them had called me in months. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Phil's number was still there. I called it. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I tried Dennis next. Same thing. Voicemail. I set the phone down and thought about it. Coincidence? Maybe. People got busy, lives moved on. But I didn't believe in that many coincidences. I pulled out an old notebook, the kind I used to carry on job sites. I started making a list, names, connections, people who'd been part of my life, who I'd helped, who I'd introduced to my son. The list got longer than I expected. Phil, former coworker, now doing private security consulting. I'd helped him get his first contract. Dennis, contractor, small operation. I'd steered work his way for years. A woman named Angela, property manager for a mid-sized apartment building. In my son's building. I'd known her professionally for a decade. 2 others from my old city job. 3 from my current client base. All of them connected to my son now. All of them silent. I sat there looking at that list and felt something cold settle in my chest. He hadn't just cut me off. He'd been building his own network, using my connections, my relationships, my credibility, and then he'd locked me out. I almost called him then, almost picked up the phone and demanded an explanation, but I stopped myself, because calling him would be playing his game. It would be me acting like the desperate father he'd already painted me as. It would confirm the story he was telling. So I didn't call, I just kept watching. The third week, the real picture started forming. I was having coffee at a diner near my apartment when I saw Phil walk in. He didn't see me at first. I was in a corner booth, mostly hidden by the breakfast crowd. He ordered at the counter, waited for his food, then sat down 3 booths away. I watched him eat, watched him check his phone. Normal morning. When he got up to leave, I caught his eye. "Phil." He stopped, turned. His face went through several expressions in quick succession. Surprise, recognition, something like guilt, then a careful neutral mask. "Hey," he said. "Long time?" "Yeah. How have you been?" "Good. Busy." He shifted his weight. "You?" "Same." Silence. "Well," he said, "I should get going. Good seeing you." He was already turning away. "You still doing security work?" I asked. He paused. "Yeah, staying busy." "Good. That's good." I kept my voice even, friendly. "You know, I've got a client who might need someone. Small office building downtown. I could send them your way." Phil's expression tightened just a fraction. "That's okay. I'm pretty booked up right now." "Sure. Just let me know if that changes." "Will do." He left. I stayed in the booth and finished my coffee. He'd been lying. Not about being busy. Maybe that part was true. But about the rest. The way he'd looked at me. The way he'd cut the conversation short. The way he'd turned down work he would have jumped at a year ago. Someone had gotten to him. I paid my bill and walked home slowly, thinking it through. My son had done more than just block my number. He'd poisoned the well. He'd told people something. I didn't know what exactly, but it was enough to make them avoid me. Enough to make them uncomfortable. Toxic energy. Drama. Whatever story he'd told, it was effective. When I got home, I opened my laptop and started digging. I pulled up every social media platform I could think of. Most of them I barely used, but I had accounts. Bare-bones profiles. Enough to see what was public. My son's accounts were locked down now. I couldn't see anything. But his wife's weren't. Not all of them. She'd missed one platform, some photo-sharing app I'd signed up for years ago and forgotten about. I scrolled through her posts. Most of it was the same performative happiness I'd seen before. Brunch, outfits, check-ins at expensive places. But then I found a post from 2 months ago, right around the time my son had sent that text. It was a long caption under a photo of her and my son at sunset somewhere scenic. It's hard to set boundaries with family, especially when they've been part of your life for so long. But sometimes you have to choose your peace over their expectations. We're learning to prioritize our mental health and our marriage. It's not easy, but it's necessary. Thank you to everyone who supported us through this transition. We see you and we appreciate you. The comments were full of support. So proud of you. You deserve to be happy. Boundaries are healthy. Family doesn't get a free pass to be toxic. I read every comment. 37 of them. Not one person asked what had happened. Not one person questioned the narrative. They just accepted it, supported it, reinforced it. I sat back and looked at the ceiling. She was good. I'd give her that. She'd framed it perfectly. Vague enough that people could project their own family drama onto it. Specific enough that it felt real. She'd made them the victims and me the aggressor without ever saying what I'd supposedly done, because I hadn't done anything. That was the genius of it. You can't defend yourself against vague accusations. You can't argue with toxic energy or unhealthy boundaries. Those words don't mean anything concrete, but they sound serious. They sound like therapy talk, like growth, like healing. And anyone who questioned it would look like they were attacking someone's mental health. I closed the laptop and sat in the silence of my apartment. My son had rejected me. His wife had crafted the narrative, and their friends had chosen sides without ever hearing mine. I'd been erased from his life and recast as the villain in a story I didn't even know I was part of. The 4th week, I stopped checking, I stopped looking at social media, stopped scrolling through posts, stopped trying to piece together what they were saying about me. It didn't matter. What mattered was this. I'd spent the past month watching, learning, understanding, and now I knew exactly what had happened. My son hadn't just cut me off on impulse. This had been planned, coordinated. He and his wife had decided I was expendable, and they'd executed that decision methodically. Block the number, remove from social media, tell a story that made them sympathetic and me problematic. Build a support network that reinforced their version of events. It was clean, it was effective, it was thorough. I respected the efficiency of it, even as I felt the weight of it settle in my chest. They'd thought this through. They'd made sure I couldn't just call and fix it, couldn't just show up and explain. They'd built walls and filled the space around those walls with people who believed their story. Smart. But they'd made one mistake. They assumed I'd react emotionally. They assumed I'd be hurt, angry, desperate. They assumed I'd chase them, beg them, try to force my way back into their lives. They assumed I'd confirm the narrative. I didn't, I just watched. And while I watched, I started remembering things. Details. My son's apartment was in a building I knew. The property manager was Angela. I'd worked with her on and off for 8 years. She managed several buildings in that area. I'd helped her navigate some tricky maintenance issues, recommended reliable contractors, walked her through access control upgrades. She liked me, trusted me, at least she used to. I pulled out my phone and called her number. She answered on the second ring. Hello? Angela, hi, it's David Brennan. A pause. Oh, hi, David. Her voice was careful, professional but distant. How have you been? I asked. Good, busy. You know how it is? I do. Listen, I was wondering if you had time to grab coffee sometime. I wanted to pick your brain about a project I'm working on. Another pause, longer this time. I'm pretty swamped right now. Maybe in a few weeks? Sure, no problem. I'll follow up. Okay, take care. She hung up. I sat there holding the phone. That was confirmation. She'd been warm, friendly, eager to talk before. Now she was making excuses, keeping distance. My son, or more likely his wife, had gotten to her too. I wondered what they'd said. Probably some version of the same story. Dad's difficult. Dad has boundary issues. We're trying to establish some healthy distance. If he calls, just be polite but don't engage too much. Something like that. Effective. I set the phone down and walked to my office. Pulled out a filing cabinet. Started going through old records. I had a folder on Angela's buildings, maintenance logs, contractor invoices, building codes, security protocols. I had a folder on Phil's consulting business, contracts I'd helped him get, contact information for clients. I had files on Dennis, on several other contractors, on building managers and property owners I'd worked with over the years. I had a lot of information. I'd always been good at keeping records. It was part of the job. You documented everything. You kept paper trails. You made sure you could prove what happened when something went wrong. Now I sat at my desk surrounded by 30 years of professional relationships, carefully documented and organized, and I started thinking about what would happen if those relationships shifted. Not dramatically, not illegally, just shifted. I didn't need to hurt anyone. I didn't need to break laws or burn bridges. I just needed to stop helping, stop making introductions, stop recommending people, stop being the guy who knew everyone and could smooth things over when problems came up. Stop being useful. It was passive, clean, completely legal. And it would work because they'd built their lives on my foundation without ever realizing it. I closed the filing cabinet and went to bed. That night I slept better than I had in weeks. The fifth week, nothing happened. I went about my business, worked my jobs, paid my bills, lived my life. I didn't call my son. I didn't call Angela or Phil or Dennis. I didn't call anyone. I just existed quietly in my small apartment with my organized files and my 30 years of professional knowledge and my clear understanding of exactly how things connected. And I waited. Because I knew something they didn't. They thought cutting me off had made them free. It had only made them vulnerable. The call came 7 weeks after that first text. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was at my desk reviewing a proposal for a client when my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Dad? My son's voice. Tight. Stressed. I didn't say anything. Dad, are you there? I'm here. Look, I know we haven't talked, but I need your help. I waited. Dad, did you hear me? I heard you. We need money. Rent. We're getting evicted if we don't pay by tomorrow. $3,000. Can you help us? I leaned back in my chair, looked at the ceiling. Dad? Please. I know things have been weird, but this is serious. We'll lose the apartment. You said you were tired of me and my requests, I said quietly. Silence on the other end. Look, I was stressed. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? I don't know. We've had a lot going on, and I just needed space. You had space. 2 months of it? I know, and I'm sorry. But right now, I really need your help. Please. I closed my eyes. Part of me, a big part, wanted to say yes. Wanted to send the money. Wanted to be the dad who showed up when his kid needed him, no matter what. But something had changed in those 7 weeks. I'd watched them erase me. I'd seen the story they'd told. I'd felt the coldness from people I'd known for years. I'd seen exactly how disposable they'd made me. And now, at the first sign of real trouble, they were calling. Not because they'd missed me. Not because they'd realized they were wrong. Because they needed money. Because I was useful again. I'm sorry, I said. I don't have a son. What? You made that clear 2 months ago. I'm just respecting your decision. Dad, wait. I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. I declined the call. It rang 5 more times in the next 10 minutes. I declined each one. Then came the texts. Dad, please answer. We'll lose everything. I didn't mean what I said. Please don't do this. Dad, I'm begging you. I read each one. Didn't respond. An hour later, his wife started calling. I didn't answer. Her texts were different, angrier. You're really going to abandon your son over your pride? This is exactly why we need a distance from you. We're going to be homeless because you're petty. I hope you're happy. I set the phone aside and made dinner. Later that evening, my son left a voicemail. I listened to it. His voice was shaking, almost crying. Dad, I don't understand why you're doing this. I said I was sorry. I made a mistake. But you're really going to let us lose our home over this? That's not like you. You're a good person. You've always helped me. Please, I'm begging you. I'll do anything. Just please help us. I deleted the voicemail. Then I went to my office and opened a locked cabinet in the back corner. Inside were things I'd collected over the years, not anything dramatic, just useful things. Old access badges that probably still worked, building schematics from various properties around the city, contractor notebooks with schedules and site information, master key copies from buildings that had never bothered to change their locks, contact information for people who owed me favors, documentation of shortcuts, gaps in security, maintenance schedules, 30 years of institutional knowledge. I pulled out a specific folder. Angela's buildings, my son's apartment building. I opened it and started reading. Maintenance schedules, access protocols, contractor agreements, lease terms, property management policies. Everything I needed to know about how that building operated, and everything I needed to know about what would happen if certain supports were quietly removed. I didn't need to hurt him. I just needed to let him stand where he'd pushed me. Friday morning, I woke up early, made coffee, did 20 minutes of stretching exercises. My back wasn't what it used to be, and if I didn't stay on top of it, I'd pay for it later. Then I sat at my kitchen table and drank my coffee while watching the sky lighten outside my window. My phone sat face down on the table. I knew what was on it. More texts, more voicemails, more desperation. I didn't check. Instead, I thought about the mechanics of how things worked. My son's apartment building was a mid-rise. 8 floors, maybe 60 units, built in the late 90s, renovated about 5 years ago. Decent place. Nothing fancy, but safe, well-maintained, in a neighborhood that had been slowly gentrifying. Angela managed it along with 2 other buildings in the area. She was good at her job, but stretched thin. She managed properties for an investment group that owned maybe a dozen buildings across the city. They were hands-off owners. They cared about rent collection and property values, but didn't want to deal with day-to-day operations. That's why they hired people like Angela. And people like Angela relied on people like me. Not officially. Not in any way that would show up in a contract or an org chart. But informally, I'd been a resource for her for years. When she had a maintenance problem she couldn't figure out, she called me. When she needed a reliable contractor, I recommended someone. When she had questions about building codes or security systems or equipment failures, I walked her through it. I'd never charged her, didn't need to. It was just networking, professional courtesy, the kind of relationship you build over years of working adjacent to someone. She'd helped me too, referred clients my way, put in good words with property owners, given me access to buildings when I needed to scope out projects. It was reciprocal. Was. I finished my coffee and pulled out my phone, scrolled through the messages without reading them. 37 unread texts, 6 voicemails. I deleted all of them. Then I scrolled through my contacts until I found Angela's number. I didn't call it. I just looked at it for a while, thinking about how relationships worked, how they were built on assumptions of mutual benefit, how they fell apart when one side stopped participating. Then I put the phone away. Around 9 a.m., I drove across town to a property I'd been consulting on, small commercial building. The owner wanted to upgrade their access control system, and I was helping them evaluate options. It was straightforward work, mostly just reviewing proposals from different vendors and explaining the pros and cons. I spent 2 hours walking the property with the owner, taking notes, answering questions. He was a nice guy. Late 60s, former contractor who'd gotten into property management late in his career. He reminded me of myself in some ways, practical, detail-oriented, skeptical of people who promise too much. "What do you think?" he asked after we'd reviewed the 3rd proposal. "This one," I said, pointing to the middle option. "Best value, good equipment, fair price, and the company's been around long enough that they won't disappear in 6 months." He nodded. "That's what I was thinking, too. You got time for coffee?" "Sure." We went to a diner nearby, ordered coffee, and sat in a booth by the window. "You ever think about getting back into it full-time?" he asked. "This consulting stuff is fine, but you've got the knowledge for bigger projects." "I like the flexibility," I said. "Don't want to be tied down to one company again?" Fair enough. He stirred his coffee. You got family in the area? Used to. Something in my tone made him look up. He didn't push, just nodded. That's rough, he said. We drank our coffee and talked about other things. When we finished, he paid the bill, insisted on it, and we walked to the parking lot. Let me know if you need anything else, I said. Will do. Appreciate your help. I drove home taking the long route. Went past my son's neighborhood, didn't stop, just drove through, observing. It was a nice area. Young professionals, small families, coffee shops on every corner, boutique stores. The kind of neighborhood where people paid too much rent but told themselves it was worth it for the lifestyle. My son's building was on a tree-lined street near a small park. I'd been there exactly 4 times. Each visit had felt like an intrusion, like I was contaminating their carefully curated space with my working-class presence. I kept driving. Back home, I parked in my assigned spot and walked up to my apartment. The building was older, less trendy, but it was solid. Good bones. The kind of place where people actually lived instead of performing life for social media. I liked it here. Inside, I made a sandwich and ate it, standing at the kitchen counter. Then I went to my office and sat at my desk. I pulled out a notebook, plain, spiral-bound, the kind you could buy at any drugstore. At the top of a blank page, I wrote, Connections. Then I started listing them. Angela, property manager. My son's building and 2 others. Phil, security consultant, friend of my son's now. Dennis, contractor. Does work for multiple property managers I know. Keith, building inspector, city employee, old colleague. Lydia, insurance agent. Handles policies for several buildings Angela manages. Tom, owner of a small security equipment company. Sells to property managers citywide. Raj, HVAC specialist. Works on commercial and residential properties. The list grew, 15 names, 20, 25. Some were people I'd worked with directly. Others were secondary connections, people I'd helped indirectly, or people who knew people I'd helped. All of them were part of an invisible web that kept buildings running, kept tenants housed, kept property managers employed, kept small businesses operating. And I was a node in that web. Not the center, I wasn't that important, but a significant node, the kind that, if removed, would cause stress in the system. Not immediately, but eventually. I studied the list. Then I drew lines connecting names. Who knew who relied on who I'd introduced to who. Angela knew Dennis through me. Phil got clients through Angela. Lydia's insurance company worked with Tom's security company. Raj did work for buildings that Keith inspected. Connections, relationships, dependencies. I'd built some of these connections deliberately. Others had formed naturally over years of working in the same ecosystem, but they all existed, and they all mattered. And most of them wouldn't exist without me. I set the pen down and leaned back in my chair. This wasn't about revenge. Not exactly. It was about withdrawal. They wanted me gone? Fine. I'd be gone. Completely gone. Not just from my son's life, but from the support structure he'd borrowed from me without ever realizing it. I tore the page out of the notebook, folded it carefully, and locked it in my desk drawer. Then I opened my laptop and started drafting emails. The first one went to Keith, the building inspector. Hey Keith, hope you're doing well. Quick question. Remember that favor I mentioned a few months back? Going to have to take a rain check. Got some personal stuff going on and need to step back from side projects for a while. Let me know if you need anything urgent, otherwise I'll probably be low contact for the next few months. Take care. Short, casual, gave him nothing to argue with. I sent it and moved to the next name, Phil, the security consultant. Phil, saw you at the diner last week. Wanted to follow up? I won't be able to send referrals your way for a while. Scaling back my consulting work to focus on some other priorities. Hope business is going well. Then Dennis, the contractor. Dennis, quick heads up. I'm cutting back on projects for the foreseeable future. Won't be needing any contractor work or sending clients your way. Thanks for all the good work over the years. Best of luck. One by one, I went through the list. Each email was polite, professional, gave no indication of anger or conflict. I was just stepping back, reducing my involvement, focusing on other things, nothing personal. By the time I finished, it was late afternoon. I'd sent 17 emails. I closed the laptop and sat in the quiet of my office. It felt strange, like I was dismantling something I'd spent years building, but that was the point. They'd decided I was disposable. Now they'd find out what happened when I actually disappeared. That evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Mr. Brennan? Woman's voice. Professional. Speaking. This is Jennifer calling from Riverside Property Management. I'm Angela Chen's assistant. She asked me to reach out to you about a maintenance issue at one of our buildings. I paused. Which building? The Meadowbrook Apartments. We're having problems with the HVAC system on the 3rd floor. Angela mentioned you might be able to take a look. The Meadowbrook Apartments. My son's building. I'm not available, I said. Oh, okay. She said you usually help with these kinds of things? I'm scaling back my consulting work. You'll need to find someone else. I see. Can you recommend anyone? I could. I knew 3 people who could handle that job easily. No, I said. Sorry. Oh, okay. Well, thank you anyway. She hung up. I set the phone down and stared at it. That was faster than I'd expected. They were already running into problems, already reaching out for help, and I was already unavailable. I wondered how long it would take for them to realize the pattern. Not long, probably. Angela was smart. She'd notice eventually that I wasn't responding, wasn't helping, wasn't available. She'd figure it out. But by then, it would be too late to fix it. Around 8 p.m., I got a text from an unknown number. Dad, it's me. They're changing the locks tomorrow. Please, I'm begging you. Just this once. I'll never ask again. I read it twice. Never ask again. That was almost funny. He'd asked dozens of times over the past 3 years. Rent money, car payments, credit card bills, emergency vet bills for a dog they'd bought without being able to afford it, repairs for a laptop, deposits for trips they couldn't afford, money for furniture, for clothes, for restaurants, for concerts. I'd said yes every time, and every time it was supposed to be the last time. I deleted the text without responding. 10 minutes later, another one came. Dad, please. She's crying. We don't know what to do. I turned the phone off and plugged it in to charge. Then I went to bed. I didn't sleep right away. I lay there in the dark thinking about the mechanics of what was happening. They were getting evicted. That was real, that was serious. But it wasn't sudden. Evictions don't happen overnight. There's a process, missed payments, notices, warnings, hearings. They'd known this was coming for weeks, maybe months, and they'd only called me at the last possible moment. Not because they valued me, because they were desperate. I thought about my ex-wife. She'd left when my son was in high school, said she needed to find herself, said our marriage had become stale, said she felt trapped. She'd found herself in Arizona with a man who sold real estate and drove a BMW. We'd split everything fairly. She'd taken half of our savings and moved across the country. We barely spoke anymore. Christmas cards, brief texts on our son's birthday. She'd never been particularly close with him either. He reminded her too much of me, I think. Too practical. Too boring. But she'd never cut him off. Neither had I. Until now. And even now, I wasn't really cutting him off. I was just responding to what he'd already done. He'd cut me off first. I was just refusing to pretend it hadn't happened. That thought settled something in my chest. This wasn't cruelty. This was clarity. He'd made a choice. I was honoring that choice. If it hurt, and I suspected it would hurt soon, badly, that was the consequence of his decision, not mine. I rolled over and closed my eyes. Sleep came eventually. Saturday morning, I woke to 17 missed calls. I didn't check the voicemails. Instead, I got dressed, made coffee, and drove to the gym. It was a small place, locally owned, no fancy equipment, no juice bar, no influencers taking selfies. Just weights, cardio machines, and serious people who showed up to work. I liked it. I spent an hour there. Weights, rowing machine, stretching. My body ached in the familiar way that meant I was maintaining rather than deteriorating. In the locker room, I ran into a guy I'd seen around. Late 40s, always polite. We'd exchanged nods and small talk a few times. "How's it going?" he asked while we were at the sinks. "Good. You?" "Can't complain." He dried his hands. "You hear about that building fire downtown?" "No." "Yeah, last night. Old apartment building. Everyone got out okay, but it's a mess. Building's probably a total loss." "That's rough." "Yeah, makes you think, about how fast things can go wrong." I nodded. He left. I finished washing my hands and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked older than I felt. Gray in my hair, lines around my eyes, but solid, still strong, still capable. I drove home and showered. Then I sat at my kitchen table and finally checked my phone. The voicemails were all from my son or his wife. I listened to one, just one. My son's voice, raw and breaking. "Dad, they changed the locks. Our stuff is in the hallway. We're at a motel. Please, I don't know what else to do. Just call me back, please." I deleted it. Then I deleted all the others without listening. I made lunch. Turkey sandwich, chips, an apple. Ate it slowly while reading a book. Normal Saturday. Except my son was homeless. Except he was in a motel with his wife, probably panicking, probably fighting, probably scrolling through his contacts looking for someone else to bail them out. Except everyone he might call was someone I'd connected him with, and I'd just sent emails to most of them explaining that I was stepping back. I finished my sandwich and threw the trash away. Then I went to my office and opened my laptop. I had 3 responses to my emails. The first was from Keith, the building inspector. "No problem, man. Take care of yourself. Let me know if you need anything." The second was from Raj, the HVAC specialist. "Understood. Hope everything's okay. Thanks for all the referrals over the years." The third was from Dennis, the contractor. "Got it. Things change. Good luck with whatever you're working on." All of them were polite, professional, accepting. None of them pushed back or asked questions, because that's how these relationships worked. They were professional, not personal. When someone stepped back, you respected it and moved on. I closed the laptop and looked out the window. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number. I answered. "Mr. Brennan?" Man's voice, tired. "Yes." "This is Eric Walsh. I manage the Pine Street storage facility. I have a unit here registered to a David Brennan Jr. He's behind on payments and we've been trying to reach him. The number on file isn't working. You're listed as the emergency contact." My son had a storage unit. I'd forgotten about that. "What about it?" I asked. "We're going to have to auction the contents if we don't receive payment by the end of the month. Just wanted to give you a heads up since you're the emergency contact." "How much does he owe?" $470. Not a lot. 3 months' rent, probably. "I'm not responsible for his debts," I said. "I understand. Just wanted to make sure you were aware." "I'm aware." "Okay, thank you." He hung up. I set the phone down. My son had a storage unit full of stuff he couldn't fit in his apartment. Now he was losing his apartment, and he'd lose the storage unit too. Everything collapsing at once. Not because of me, because of him. Because he'd built a life on credit, on favors, on handouts, on assumptions that someone would always catch him when he fell. And I'd been that someone until I wasn't. I spent the rest of the afternoon organizing paperwork in my office. Old contracts, invoices, tax documents. It was mindless work, but it needed to be done. Around 5 p.m., someone knocked on my door. I looked through the peephole. My son. He was standing in the hallway outside my apartment, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He looked tired, hair messy, t-shirt wrinkled. He'd probably been wearing the same clothes since yesterday. He knocked again. "Dad, I know you're home. Your car's in the lot. Please, just let me in. Just talk to me." I stood on the other side of the door and said nothing. "Dad, please, I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said what I said. I was wrong. I was stupid. Please just open the door." Silence. "Dad, we lost the apartment. All our stuff is in a storage locker at the motel. We can't afford to stay there more than a few days. I don't know what to do. I need your help." I watched him through the peephole. His shoulders sagged. He leaned his forehead against the door. "Please," he whispered. "I'm your son." I stepped back from the door and walked to my office. Behind me, I heard him knock a few more times. Then silence. Then footsteps fading down the hallway. I sat at my desk and waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then I heard it. A car starting in the parking lot. Driving away. I got up and looked out the window. Saw his car, a sedan he'd bought used 2 years ago and complained about constantly, pulling out of the lot and disappearing down the street. I stood there for a while, watching the empty parking space. Then I went back to my office and continued organizing paperwork. That night, I made dinner and ate it in front of the television. Some documentary about Antarctic exploration. Interesting enough. My phone buzzed periodically. I ignored it. Around 10 p.m., I turned everything off and went to bed. I slept fine. Tuesday morning, I went to the gym. Same routine, weights, cardio, stretching. The rhythm of it kept me grounded. In the locker room, I saw the guy I'd talked to before, the one who'd mentioned the building fire. "Morning," he said. "Morning. You hear about that apartment building I mentioned? The one that burned? What about it?" Turns out the fire started because of faulty wiring. Building owner had been ignoring maintenance complaints for months. Now he's facing lawsuits, and the tenants are all displaced. Whole thing was preventable. Usually is. He nodded. Makes you think about how much depends on people doing their jobs right. It does? I finished changing and left. On the drive home, I thought about that. How much depends on people doing their jobs right? My job, for 30 years, had been making sure buildings functioned, making sure systems worked, making sure people were safe. I'd been good at it, and even now, consulting, I was still good at it. But I'd also learned something else. How fragile systems were. How many things had to go right for a building to function smoothly. How quickly things fell apart when just one person stopped doing their job. One person. That's all it took sometimes. One inspector who looked the other way. One contractor who cut corners. One property manager who ignored complaints. One maintenance supervisor who didn't follow up. Systems were strong, but they were also vulnerable. And I'd spent 30 years learning exactly where the vulnerabilities were. Back home, I checked my email. Angela had sent another message. David, I don't know what's going on, but I need you to at least let me know you're okay. I'm worried about you, and I'm really in a bind with this building. Please call me or email me back. Just something, please. I could hear the desperation in her words even through text. She was stressed. The building was having problems, the tenants were complaining, her bosses were asking questions, and her go-to person wasn't responding. I felt a flicker of something. Not quite guilt, more like recognition. Angela was a good property manager. She worked hard, she cared about her tenants. She wasn't the villain here. But she'd made a choice. She'd believed a story about me without asking my side. She'd pulled away. And now she was dealing with the consequences of that choice. I closed the email without responding. Another email came in while I was sitting there, from Lydia, the insurance agent. David, I heard through the grapevine that you're going through something personal. Just wanted to reach out and offer support if you need it. Whatever you're dealing with, I hope you're taking care of yourself. If you want to talk, I'm here. Best, Lydia. That one was different. Not desperate, not demanding, just kind. I almost responded, but then I thought about the grapevine she'd mentioned, the network of people who talked, the stories that spread, and I wondered what she'd heard. Probably some version of my son's narrative. Probably something about me being difficult or unstable. Probably something that made her feel sorry for me while also justifying keeping her distance. I closed that email too. Around noon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick it up. Hello? Mr. Brennan? This is Amanda from Valley Property Management. I got your name from Angela Chen. She said you might be able to help with a building issue we're having. I'm not available right now. Oh, she said you were really knowledgeable about HVAC systems and... I'm scaling back my consulting. You'll need to find someone else. I see. Can you recommend anyone? No, sorry. I hung up. Another call came in 5 minutes later. Different property management company, same request. I gave them the same answer. Word was spreading. Angela was reaching out to other property managers, asking them to contact me, trying to get around my non-responses by having other people call. It wasn't going to work. I turned my phone to silent and set it face down on my desk. That afternoon, I worked on the proposal for the retail security job, finished it, sent it off to the client. Then I pulled out a notebook and started sketching. Not anything elaborate, just a map. I drew my son at the center. Then I drew lines connecting him to the people and systems in his life. Trevor, the friend he was staying with. Trevor didn't owe him anything. How long before that relationship fractured under the strain? His wife. She was the one who'd orchestrated a lot of the social media narrative, but she was also feeling the pressure. How long before she started blaming him for their situation? Angela. She managed the building they'd been evicted from. She was stressed and reaching out for help she wasn't getting. How long before the building had more problems? How long before those problems affected other tenants, other properties? Phil? The security consultant. He'd gotten work through my recommendations. Now those recommendations had stopped. How long before his income took a hit? How long before he stopped being available for favors? Dennis. The contractor. Same situation. I drew more lines, more connections, more dependencies. The map grew complex, and at the center of it, isolated now, was my son. Cut off from me, losing his housing, straining his friendship with Trevor, putting pressure on his marriage, running out of people to call, all because he'd decided I was disposable. I studied the map for a long time. Then I tore it out of the notebook, folded it, and locked it in my desk drawer next to the other one. That evening, I made dinner. Chicken stir-fry, vegetables, rice, simple sauce. I ate it while watching a documentary about deep-sea exploration. Around 8 p.m., someone knocked on my door. I checked the peephole. Trevor. He looked angry, tired. He knocked again, harder. Mr. Brennan, I know you're in there. We need to talk. I stepped back from the door. Your son is falling apart. You need to see what you're doing to him. I walked to my office, closed the door, put on headphones. Trevor kept knocking for a while. Then I heard his voice, muffled but angry. Fine. You want to hide? Hide, but you're destroying him. You know that, right? You're destroying your own son because he hurt your feelings. The knocking stopped. I waited, took off the headphones. Silence. I checked the peephole. Empty hallway. I went back to my office and sat at my desk. Destroying him. Maybe. Or maybe I was just letting him experience the consequences of his own choices for the first time in his adult life. He'd spent 3 years making bad decisions, spending money he didn't have, living beyond his means, burning bridges, prioritizing image over substance, and every time it went wrong, I'd bailed him out. I'd taught him that consequences didn't matter, that someone would always catch him, that he could do whatever he wanted because Dad would fix it. I'd enabled him, and now I'd stopped. And he was learning, for the first time, that actions had consequences. That wasn't destruction, that was education. Brutal, maybe, but necessary. I pulled up my email and checked for new messages. 3 more from people asking for my help with property management issues, all referred by Angela or other property managers who knew me. I sent the same response to each one. Not available. Best of luck. Then I checked my bank account, looked at the numbers. I was comfortable. Not rich, but stable. I had savings. I had steady income from consulting. I had low overhead. I could have sent my son money. I could have paid his rent. I could have bailed him out one more time. The money wasn't the issue. The principle was. He'd rejected me when he didn't need me. I was rejecting him now that he did. It was symmetrical. It was fair. It was brutal. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of my office. Outside, the city continued. People lived their lives, made their choices, faced their consequences. My son was somewhere out there, learning the same lessons everyone eventually learned, that people weren't infinitely patient, that bridges, once burned, didn't rebuild themselves, that you couldn't treat someone as disposable and then expect them to be there when you needed them. Hard lessons, the kind that stuck. I turned off my desk lamp and went to bed. Sleep came easier than I expected. Wednesday morning, I woke to a text from an unknown number. This is Trevor. Your son tried to hurt himself last night. He's okay, but he's not okay. You need to know that. You need to know what you're doing. I read it 3 times. Tried to hurt himself. My chest tightened. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the phone, staring at those words. Then I thought about the pattern. My son had always been dramatic when he didn't get his way, not suicidal, just dramatic. He'd learned early that if he escalated the emotion, people would give him what he wanted. I'd seen it dozens of times over the years. When he was a teenager and wanted something I'd said no to, he'd sulk, slam doors, claim we didn't love him. When he was in college and needed money, he'd talk about how stressed he was, how he couldn't focus on school, how everything was falling apart. When he was an adult and needed a bailout, he'd describe the situation in catastrophic terms. Eviction, homelessness, ruin, always escalating, always pushing for maximum sympathy. And it usually worked. But this? Tried to hurt himself? That was a new level. I wanted to believe it was just more manipulation, more drama, more emotional leverage. But what if it wasn't? What if he'd actually done something? What if this was real? I sat there for a long time, holding the phone, trying to decide what to do. Call him? Rush over to Trevor's place? Send money? Or hold the line? I thought about the past 3 years, the constant requests, the lack of boundaries, the way he'd treated me like an ATM. I thought about the text 2 months ago. Don't call me anymore. I'm tired of you and your requests. I thought about being blocked, being erased, being painted as toxic. I thought about all of it, and then I thought about the most likely explanation for Trevor's text. My son was desperate. He'd tried everything else. Money requests, guilt trips, having other people intervene. Nothing had worked. So now he was escalating to the ultimate emotional manipulation. Self-harm. Real or fake, it didn't matter. The goal was the same. Make me feel responsible. Make me feel guilty. Make me give in. And maybe he had done something. Maybe he'd made a gesture. Taken a few pills, not enough to be dangerous. Cut himself superficially. Something visible enough to be alarming, but not serious enough to be life-threatening. Something designed to get a reaction. I'd seen addicts do similar things. People in desperate situations who needed one more fix, one more loan, one more chance. They'd escalate to whatever level necessary to break down resistance. I deleted Trevor's text, then I got up, made coffee, and went through my normal routine. But it stayed with me. that text, those words, tried to hurt himself. All day it gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. I went to a job site, met with a client, discussed security camera placement, did my work. But in the back of my mind, what if it was real? What if he'd actually tried to hurt himself? What if he succeeded next time? Would that be my fault? I thought about that question from every angle. Legally? No. He was an adult, responsible for his own choices. Morally, that was more complicated. If I had the power to prevent something terrible and chose not to, was I responsible? But I didn't have the power to prevent anything. Not really. I could send money. That would solve the immediate problem. But then what? He'd be back in the same situation in a few months. More debt, more crisis, more desperate calls, and I'd be back in the same position, the backup plan, the emergency fund, the person who existed to solve his problems. Nothing would change, unless I changed it, by holding the line, by letting him hit bottom, by forcing him to figure it out himself. That was brutal. That was potentially dangerous. But it was also the only way things would actually change. I drove home, those thoughts circling in my head. At home, I checked my phone, more missed calls, more texts from unknown numbers. I deleted them without reading, made dinner, ate it, cleaned up. Normal evening. Except nothing felt normal. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Tried to hurt himself. What if it was real? What if next time he succeeded? Could I live with that? I rolled over, closed my eyes, tried to force sleep. But the question remained. Around midnight, I gave up on sleep. Got out of bed, went to my office, turned on the desk lamp, pulled out my phone, stared at it. I could call, I could check, I could just make sure he was actually okay. That wouldn't be giving in. That would just be checking. My finger hovered over the screen. Then I set the phone down. No, this was the game. This was the manipulation. Make me worry, make me doubt, make me feel responsible. Break down my resolve one piece at a time until I gave in. I'd seen it before. Different contexts, different people, but the pattern was the same. Escalate until you get what you want. And if I gave in now, I'd just be teaching him that this tactic worked. That if he threatened self-harm, I'd come running. That would make him more likely to do it again, and again, and again. Until one day it wouldn't be manipulation anymore. It would be real. The only way to prevent that was to not reward the behavior, to hold firm, to trust that he was manipulating, not actually in danger. And if I was wrong, if he was really in danger, then that was on him. Not me. He was an adult. He made his choices. I couldn't live his life for him. I couldn't protect him from himself. All I could do was refuse to enable the patterns that had gotten him here. I turned off the desk lamp and went back to bed. This time, sleep came. Restless, but it came. Thursday morning, I woke up groggy, made coffee, drank it slowly while staring out the window at the parking lot below. Gray sky. Looked like rain. I checked my phone. One new text. Unknown number. He's okay, in case you care, but he's not really okay. None of this is okay. Trevor. I deleted the text, then I blocked the number. I spent the day doing busy work, organizing files, updating my business records, cleaning my apartment, mindless tasks that kept me moving. Around 3 p.m., my phone rang. Actual name this time, not unknown. A client. I answered. David, hi, it's Bill from the office building project. Yeah, I remember. What's up? Just wanted to let you know we got the boiler replaced. Went with the company you suggested. They did good work. Wanted to say thanks. No problem. Glad it worked out. Yeah. Hey, you doing okay? You sound tired. Just busy. I hear that. Well, if you need anything, let me know. Will do. Thanks, Bill. He hung up. I sat there holding the phone, staring at nothing. Bill was a good guy, straightforward, appreciative, the kind of client I liked working with. That phone call felt normal, felt like the life I'd built for myself. A quiet life, professional, uncomplicated. That's what I'd lost when my son was part of my life. Constant drama, constant stress, constant emotional manipulation. I'd gotten that back when he cut me off. For 2 months, I'd had peace. And then he'd called, desperate, needing money. And now I had this gnawing worry, this guilt, this constant pressure. But it would end. One way or another, it would end. Either he'd give up and figure things out himself, or he'd find someone else to enable him. Or he'd hit bottom so hard he'd have no choice but to change. Or I didn't let myself finish that thought. I went to the gym, pushed myself harder than usual, needed to burn off the nervous energy. Afterward, in the locker room, the guy I'd talked to before was there again. "Tough workout?" he asked. "Something like that." "I hear you. Some days you just need to push yourself." I nodded. He finished changing and headed out. I sat on the bench for a while, just breathing. Then I went home, showered, made dinner. Another evening, another night, another day of holding the line. It didn't feel good, but it felt necessary, and that would have to be enough. Friday morning, I woke to silence. No calls, no texts. The first truly quiet morning in over a week. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, waiting for something. A message, a call, something. Nothing came. It felt strange. After days of constant pressure, the sudden absence of it was almost unsettling. I checked my email, a few work-related messages. Nothing urgent, nothing from Angela, nothing from anyone in my son's orbit. Radio silence. I spent the morning at home, catching up on paperwork. Around 11, I decided to go out, get lunch, walk around, clear my head. I drove to a diner in a different part of town, somewhere I'd never been before, somewhere I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. The place was half empty. I ordered a burger and coffee, sat in a booth by the window. While I was eating, my phone rang. Not an unknown number this time. A number I recognized from my professional contacts. I answered. "Hello?" "David, it's Raj, the HVAC guy." "Yeah, I remember. What's up?" "Listen, I got your email about stepping back from consulting. I wanted to ask, is everything okay?" "I'm fine. Just focusing on other things for a while." "Okay, I respect that, but I wanted to give you a heads up about something." I waited. I got a call from Angela Chen. She's pretty desperate about a problem at one of her buildings. HVAC issue, 3rd floor. She said she'd been trying to reach you but hadn't heard back. "That's right." She asked if I could take a look. I told her I'd fit it in if I could, but I'm pretty booked. Thing is, she seemed really stressed. More than usual. Said the building owner's been on her about it, tenants are complaining, and she's running out of options. "Okay." Raj hesitated. "Look, I don't know what's going on between you two, and it's none of my business. But she's always been good to work with. Fair, pays on time, doesn't jerk people around. Whatever happened, she seems like she's in a tough spot." "I appreciate you telling me. So, you're really not going to help her?" "I'm not available." "All right, just thought I'd mention it." "Thanks, Raj." He hung up. I finished my burger and sat there thinking. Angela was scrambling. The building had problems. She couldn't fix them on her own, and her usual resources weren't responding. The pressure was building on her, which meant it was building on the building, which meant it was building on the tenants, including potentially whoever lived on that 3rd floor. I wondered if my son's old apartment was on the 3rd floor. Probably not, but it didn't matter. The point was the same. Systems were failing, and I was one of the missing pieces that could fix them. But I wasn't going to, because Angela had made a choice. She'd believed a story about me. She'd pulled back. She'd contributed, even passively, to my son's narrative. And now she was dealing with the consequences. Not because I was actively sabotaging her, just because I was unavailable. I paid for my meal and left. Back home, I spent the afternoon working on a new proposal for a potential client. Large office building downtown, comprehensive security audit, good money. The kind of job I liked. Around 4 p.m., someone knocked on my door. I checked the peephole. Phil, the security consultant. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the door. Phil looked uncomfortable. "Hey, David." "Phil, can I come in?" I stepped aside, let him in, closed the door. We stood in my entryway, awkward silence. "What do you need?" I asked. "I wanted to talk to you about your son." "There's nothing to talk about. Just hear me out, please." I crossed my arms. Waited. Phil took a breath. "Look, I know he said some stuff. I know you guys had a falling out, but he's in bad shape, David. Really bad. He's staying with Trevor, but that's not going to last much longer. He's broke. His wife is freaking out. And I don't know how to say this, but he's not himself. He's talking about some dark stuff. And you're here why? Because Trevor asked me to talk to you, said maybe you'd listen to someone who wasn't family. Trevor barely knows me. He knows you well enough to know you're not a bad person, and he thinks maybe you don't realize how serious this is." I looked at Phil. Really looked at him. He seemed genuine, concerned. But there was something else there too. Discomfort. Like he didn't really want to be here, but felt obligated. "You believe him?" I asked. "My son?" "Believe what?" Whatever story he told you about me, about why we're not talking. Phil hesitated. He said you guys had some issues, that you were difficult to deal with sometimes, that he needed space. That's what he said? Yeah, more or less. And you believed him. I mean, I don't know the details, it's not my business. But you made assumptions? I guess. I nodded slowly. You know what's interesting, Phil? 2 months ago you were happy to take my calls, happy to get referrals from me, happy to use the connections I'd built over 30 years. And then my son told you some vague story about me being difficult, and suddenly you're avoiding me. Suddenly you're on his side. It's not about sides. It is, though. He told a story. You chose to believe it. You pulled back from me. And now you're here asking me to bail him out. I'm asking you to help your son. He's not my son. He told me not to call him anymore. I'm respecting his wishes. That's not... He didn't mean it like that. How did he mean it? Phil didn't have an answer for that. I walked to the door, opened it. I appreciate you coming by, but there's nothing I can do for you. David, have a good day, Phil. He stood there for a moment, then walked to the door. Stopped in the doorway. For what it's worth, I think you're making a mistake. Noted. He left. I closed the door. Stood there in my entryway, feeling the anger rise in my chest. They all believed the story. All of them. They'd chosen to believe my son's version of events without ever asking for mine. And now they wanted me to fix the situation I'd supposedly created. No, I wasn't playing that game. I went to my office, sat at my desk, pulled out the map I'd drawn earlier, looked at all those connections, all those lines. Then I took out a pen and started crossing out more names. Phil, done. He'd picked a side. Trevor, done. He was housing my son, which meant he'd picked a side too. Angela, done. She'd believed the narrative. One by one, I crossed out names. The network was shrinking, and at the center, isolated and alone, was my son, exactly where he'd put me 2 months ago. I folded the map and locked it away. Then I checked my email. New message from the client I'd sent the security proposal to. David, reviewed your proposal. Looks great. Let's move forward. Can you start next week? I smiled. First time in days. Sounds good, I wrote back. I'll send over the contract. Professional success. Clean, uncomplicated. This was what my life could be without the drama. That evening, I made dinner and ate it while watching a documentary about the history of the Brooklyn Bridge. Fascinating engineering. Massive undertaking. Took over a decade to build. I thought about that. How long it took to build something solid. How much work went into it. How much planning. How much precision. How much patience. And how quickly it could all collapse if the supports failed. My phone buzzed. Text from another unknown number. You won, okay? You win. He's destroyed. Are you happy? I stared at that message. You win. This wasn't about winning. It never was. This was about refusing to lose anymore. I deleted the text. Another buzz. Same number. He's talking about ending it. You need to know that. If something happens, it's on you. There it was again. The ultimate guilt trip. The final manipulation. If something happens, it's on you. No. If something happened, it would be on him. On his choices. On his actions. Not mine. I blocked the number. Then I turned my phone off completely. Put it in a drawer. Silence. I sat in my living room, in the quiet, and thought about responsibility. I'd been responsible for my son for 18 years. Fed him, clothed him, educated him, supported him. Then he'd become an adult. Legally, officially, fully. And I'd continued being responsible, sending money, solving problems, being the safety net, for years. At what point did responsibility shift from me to him? At what point did he become accountable for his own life? At what point did helping him become enabling him? I'd crossed that line somewhere, maybe years ago, and I'd kept crossing it, kept enabling, kept rescuing, until I stopped. And now everyone wanted to tell me that stopping was wrong, that stopping was cruel, that stopping